Hi everybody, welcome back to Suburban Garage Workshop. Well, you made it back for round two. We're going to start part two of this workbench that I'm building to hold my planer and my table saw behind me so they're not on a file cabinet and a cart that's hard to move around. If you haven't seen part one, there'll be a link down in the description. Also, if it's much later in the future, there should be the links to the other parts after I bake them. And they'll be down in the description also. So let's get at it.
We finished our last video by gluing all the frame components together. So going back to our mock-up, what we're going to do is transition from what we have here to adding all the sheathing panels, which are going to give all the cabinet its structure. So if I hide all the frame components, you can see the individual pieces of the sheathing that we're going to cut up next. And this is all out of 3/4 inch stock. The first parts we're going to work on are the sides, which are the two sides and the middle support. And these three pieces are exactly the same dimension. So over on the table saw, I'm going to rip these side pieces down out of 3/4 inch sanded plywood. And then I'll cross-cut them to length. And I repeated that for all three sides. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and glue in the first side. So copious amounts of glue on both pieces. And then I'm going to use some clamps to kind of hold them in place. And then I'm going to use an aluminum clamping square to basically kind of get everything nice and square and straight. Once that's done, I can come back with basically a pin nailer and throw some pins in. And I'll repeat those steps with the middle divider. And finally the other side. And here it is all clamped up, so I'm going to go ahead and let this dry for a few hours. With those parts drying, I'm moving on to making the base panels, and I went ahead and cut these out on the saw exactly like I did the side pieces. These base pieces are going to use pocket screws in addition to glue, and that's going to help lock the side pieces and frame all together. It's these panels that basically bridge the front and back frames into one solid unit. With the glue dry, I'm going to go ahead and remove all the clamps. Next, I'm going to go ahead and test fit the bottom panels to make sure they fit okay. And then I'm going to go ahead and glue the first panel in place. And add a few clamps to hold everything. So I'm going to go ahead and install the pocket hole screws next, and that's when I discovered a slight issue. The base frame is covering up part of the pocket hole screw, and so I can't get the head of the screw past the actual frame. So my solution to this was to take a drill bit and slightly enlarge those holes just enough to basically make a relief for the head to pass through. And once that was done, I was able to screw these in just fine. And with that near catastrophe behind me, I went ahead and replicated what I did with the other panel on the other side. After a few hours of drying, I removed the clamps. I then went ahead and moved the entire assembly over to a pair of sawhorses in my main, basically where my car usually sits, because I just needed more room to work. Okay, and with that, it was time to glue the back frame onto the assembly. I first used a heavy bead of glue all the way around. And then I placed the back frame over the assembly. And then lots and lots of clamps. And then I went around with a pin nailer and pin nailed everything in place. And then finally, pocket hole screwing the other side. Next I need to install these little blocks, and these are just to basically make the pads where the casters are going to mount a little wider.
Hi, while we're sitting here in clamping purgatory waiting for all this glue to dry, I wanted to show you why I'm using this laminated construction technique. kind of talked about it a little bit in the last video, where it's, it's very strong. It's, because of the kind of the way I'm doing this kind of mock mortise and tenon joinery, it's self-aligning, which is great without having to do all the chisel work of doing mortise and tenons. And also, it's thicker. So standard 2x4, 1.5 by 3.5. Well, this is 3 sheets of 3.25. So if I put this, you can see how much thicker this is. So it's an extra 3/4 of an inch thicker. So we've got basically a main rail here that supports the majority of the weight and transfers the weight down to these casters that are empty right here. This is 3/4 of an inch thicker, and it's laminated. And it's not a 2x4, which is possibly going to warp with the seasons or change or dry more. This stuff is dimensionally stable. Plywood, because of the alternating grain sheets in there, very strong. And now I've got 3 sheets of it laminated together. Like I said, it's thicker than a 2x4. It's going to be plenty strong. Anyway, back to watching the glue dry.
After many more hours of waiting, I finally removed all the clamps. And then I quickly hit those areas where I installed those blocks with a sander. And then I marked, drilled, and installed all the casters. Next, I'm going to go ahead and flip the cart over on its wheels and check to see how everything looks. Next, I'm going to go ahead and give this the strength test. Now, I weigh 300 pounds and I'm 6'4", and that's going to be pretty much twice the weight of any of the tools that are ever going to be on this. So you can see, even without the top installed, this thing is plenty strong. It didn't even creak when I stood on it. So I made a little mistake, and I forgot to actually include a part in the original plans. I basically forgot this filler panel that needs to go here, and this is without this piece, the drawer slides have nothing to screw to on this side. So let's make that piece next. So I've cut that panel based on the dimensions of which will be in the plans, drilled some pocket hole screws in it, and now I'm just going ahead and install it with some pocket hole screws. Next, we're going to go ahead and install the back panel that goes on the saw side. This panel gets pocket hole screws put on all 4 sides, and then it's just going to get screwed in place. Next, we'll install the back panel on the planer side. And this installs the same way, but it only has pocket hole screws on 3 sides. The top side has no screws. Next, we'll install the supports that support the planer shelf. First, the side rails get glued and screwed into the side. And then we're going to attach the front support piece. This has pocket hole screws that go through the sides and also is glued in place. And then we move on to putting the center support in place. This also uses glue and pocket screws. With the supports in place, we can install the shelf that's going to support the planer. We're going to apply a heavy bead of glue to all the upper supports, and then we're going to go ahead and pin nail this in place to keep it from moving, and then we're going to apply clamps that'll keep pressure until all the glue dries. What I've done here is I'm drawing a line down the middle, and I'm running some pin nails down the middle as well. Next, we'll move on to the supports that support the shelf for the table saw. Just like before, the side rails get glued and screwed in place. There is no front rail to install because it's already there, and we just need to install the centerpiece. This gets installed with pocket screws and glue. Next, we'll install the shelf that's going to hold the table saw. And this gets installed just like the planer shelf. Copious amounts of glue, we put the shelf in place, we're going to throw some pin nails in it to keep it from sliding around, and then we'll go around and apply some clamps. Here I've drawn a line down the middle once again so I know where that center support is and ran some pin nails through it. Lots of clamps to keep it from moving around, and then we'll let it set.
Well, I'm gonna let all this glue dry and let this sit overnight. So I think that's gonna do it for this episode. Stay tuned. Probably in, I don't know, 4 or 5 days, I'll probably have the next video up, because at this point now it's gonna go really quick. So the next video we'll put the top on and we'll build torsion box and we'll start working on those expandable tables. So that's probably gonna be the next piece we do, and then we'll do all the drawer boxes, things of that nature. So hope you enjoyed this. If you haven't, click subscribe and click that bell button. You'll get notified when the next part of this video comes out. All right, thanks. Get out in the garage and build something. Bye.